Lonely hearts, troubled minds, looking for a way that we can never find. Many roads are ahead of us, with choices to be made.
Welcome. You are about to take a journey to a place of the divine love within with Deborah Beauvais on the Love by Intuition show. For the next hour, allow her to prepare you in becoming a magnet for a profound love-infused relationship by identifying and focusing on solutions through love. Awaken the light within and let your essence shine. And now, here's Deborah Beauvais on Love by Intuition, all part of the Dream Vision 7 radio network.
Welcome, everyone. Bonjour, mes amis. And yes, here I am, Deborah Beauvais, owner and founder of the syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network. We are Boston-based. We are global. Whatever platform you listen to radio, you'll find Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. We are also proud to be the media partner for the Omega Institute in Rhinebeck, New York. And here we are on election evening. And I have to share that I'm trusting that whatever happens will be to the highest good for all human race, all animals, especially endangered, and the planet that we live on today. And just trust that all is well. So with that said, we have an excellent show for you. I actually have two guests. They are co-writers for the Crappy to Happy, Sacred Stories of Transformational Joy book. And I'm actually a co-writer in there as well. And our topic, which is part of my journey as well, is finding forgiveness for alcoholic and codependency mothers. And so we have Lynn Reilly. She's an author, licensed professional counselor, master energy therapist with a passion to educate and help people understand life in general. We have Misty, Tyme. She's also an author in her own right, speaker, corporate trainer, forgiveness expert, certified death doula, and interfaith reverend. And so we're going to be discussing the Crappy to Happy, as Kat has mentioned. And the book is Sacred Stories of Transformational Joy. James Redfield actually did the foreword, and everyone knows that he's the creator of the Celestine Prophecy. True Stories of Grit, Grace, and Love, by the main authors, Reverend Ariel Patricia and Kathleen O'Keefe Cannabis. So without further ado, come on in, Lynn and Misty. Welcome to the show.
Hi.
Hi, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Misty. I loved listening to your introduction. Like, wow, we sound so fun.
Yes, yes. So let's start with Misty. Tell us a little bit about your mom, and actually the second portion of my question is, at what point did you realize you needed to forgive? But tell us a little bit about your mom first.
Okay, I'll tell you about my mom. First of all, she was a really fun person, probably so fun you wanted her at every party. But that doesn't necessarily make her fun as your mother, right? She always had a martini in one hand and a man on the other. She was married 6 times. She worked in the entertainment business, phenomenal talent, and again, so amazing, right? But that doesn't always make for a great mother figure. She was very narcissistic. The limelight followed her, and if it didn't, she would remind you that it needed to. So ultimately, I was really proud of her in one way. In another way, she loved conflict, like to a level of conflict that it didn't even matter if you were her child, her neighbor, somebody in business, whatever. She had no problem taking you down within a short sentence. Like, her ability for comeback was amazing. But again, not necessarily great as a mother. So ultimately, and to answer the second part of your question, when I decided I really needed to forgive her was really a moment, and I talk about this in my story in Crappy to Happy, which don't you all think that should be on a T-shirt? Ultimately, when she had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's dementia, and I could no longer wait for it was my fault, I'm sorry, I wasn't the mother you deserved, that we all wait for when somebody hurts us, right? We all want the apology. We want to be proven that we're right. Ultimately, she was forgetting everything, which sometimes was a good thing for us because she forgot all the people and all the men and all the things that really had her life in turmoil most of the time. So she really was truly in the moment, and that let me really learn how to forgive her. And I talk about very specific moment in the book.
Very good. Very good. So let's switch over to Lynn. Tell us about your mom, and the same question. At what point did you realize you needed to forgive?
Well, I just first wanted to comment on Misty's story because, having read that in the book, your story was so powerful, Misty. It was just the way you described it, you could really feel the experience that you had, and your process is very relatable for many, many people who've had parents that they didn't feel supported by. And I love the way you wrote it. The work you do, I think, is incredibly important. So I just wanted to comment on that. But for myself,
both of you.
For myself, recognizing when I needed to or wanted to, I thought actually I had forgiven my mother. My mother took her life when I was a teenager, and prior to that, growing up with her, she was diagnosed bipolar disorder, and so she's very unstable emotionally, and that was difficult because most of the focus was on her, and it needed to be because she needed support and help, but she would also rely on me for it. So there wasn't a lot of support and help for me because the focus was on her, and so there was a lot of having to look out for myself and look out for her. I didn't realize how much anger I was holding on to until probably 5 years ago, not that long. I thought I had processed it, and, grief in itself is a process that's very layered, particularly if you don't allow yourself to feel it. And I had hit a point where I woke up one morning, it was actually on my birthday, and my mother had took her life 5 days before my birthday, and I always kind of felt very angry on my birthday, but like minimally angry. And that day, I was really, really angry. I was holding on to this resentment of, I can't even enjoy my birthday because it's the anniversary, so close to your death. And that helped me dive into some of those feelings I had been holding on to for a long time, and I found myself resistant to move forward. And when we're holding on to that level of anger, it's very difficult to move on in other aspects of our life because we're holding on to that toxicity and putting blame in those focuses ends up putting blame on other people and other relationships. So I saw that need for myself to forgive. And that became a really powerful piece for me in my own healing of that relationship and other relationships because I was able to step outside and look at it from the outside perspective and forgive not her behaviors or what happened, but the person underneath and the person who is struggling. And that was super important for me.
Right. Now, either one of you, did you feel guilty at all? Guilty that you didn't do enough? Guilty that could you have prevented these things? Lynn, you answer, and then Misty, you can follow.
Oh my gosh, yes. Since my mother took her life, suicide has a lot of grief layers to it, and yeah. I'm going to call it a complex grief because not only do you have your normal grieving process and your loss, but you also have your personal guilt that gets thrown on top of it and the kind of woulda, coulda, shoulda. And I think that even after my mother died, I had resolved, I was just about 15. I'd resolved I'd done enough. I could have done everything, I've done everything I can. And of course, all the adults in my life said, well, there's nothing you could have done. But I held on to that deeply embedded guilt for a long, long, long time, not recognizing it. Cognitively understood it wasn't my fault, but emotionally I held on to that of a 14-year-old child who had been the person to take care of her mother, and I felt like I had failed. So it took me a long time to actually acknowledge and let that guilt come up and see how it had been subconsciously impacting my life in a lot of ways and keeping me down in relationships and other aspects of my life to get to that point.
What you said was so powerful, Lynn, because you allowed for that guilt, those feelings to surface, to come up, and then realized there needed to be work on that so that you could release and be, more complete in a sense. And yet, it's an ongoing journey because of the layers. But that's powerful to allow yourself to let it come up instead of stuffing it inside, which most human beings do for a good part of their lives until they awaken. Yeah. So, Misty, how about you?
Well, first of all, Lynn, I just want to tell you I'm so sorry that your mom took her life. My twin brother took his life, and there is an extra layer when there's suicide involved. I can't imagine being a child and having that influential mother figure, even though she had many flaws, no longer be on the planet for you anymore. And I'm really deeply sorry for that. The suicide... Well, the suicide piece I personally know deeply, but with my mom, I was an adult. I had seen her ruin relationships for so long that I don't think I had guilt in regards to her situation. I will tell you that when she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's dementia, and her course went really quick. But she also loved vodka. Let's be clear. She had had many head injuries from many abusive relationships, and vodka was an everyday thing for at least 50 years of her life. So ultimately, her course went really quickly. I'm proud of the way I dealt with her near the end of her life. It was hard. It was super hard. Anybody who has a parent with dementia or Alzheimer's, it is hard to see the person go away. I did more than some would ever do, including in my own family, and I'm proud of myself for that. There were times where I just didn't want to go to the facility and see her that day. I would sit in the car an extra 10 minutes before I went in. Then after she died, I wanted those 10 minutes back.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that. I probably alluded to you both that my mom had mental health issues. She had a tumultuous childhood, abandonment, and a number of things went on. And so she had some issues mentally, but I also want to speak to that generation. It wasn't acceptable to talk about your stuff, anything that you experienced in your lifetime. It was just not to be spoken of. And so it's a perfect example of when horrendous things happen and you're keeping everything inside for your entire life. What happens is it turns, I believe, into mental health issues. And then my mom became an alcoholic, and it just was crazy. And she actually, my father and her were married, and she had many men as well, but she was still married, and this went on under our roof. So my sister and I became mothers, and we learned how to make highballs and screwdrivers at the time, and we were taught to strictly make it exactly the way she wanted it. So there's all kinds of things that came up with writing my little chapter, and I relate to both of you. I relate to Lynn because of you lose your childhood and you wonder where it went. That's one piece. And then with Misty, dealing with someone that has so many different personalities and really living in fear. So with everything like that, though, you come to a place where, and you can address, both of you can address where you live from a victim mindset for quite some time, not knowing how to go beyond that. And then for myself, I just started trying little ways of telling myself I was loved, I wasn't abandoned, because what happened was my mom repeated, really, she didn't stop the cycle of what she experienced. And so, I had guilt. Did I do enough for my younger siblings? All these kinds of things. But going back to realizing that I had to lose the victim mindset, it took a while because I was not conscious of work that you could do, inner work. But what I worked on, not knowing what to do, was to love myself, because that was one of the key things of not feeling loved. And feeling, unworthy and all of that. So I'll start with Lynn first. What was the first step that you did? I was much younger at the time, but what was the first step that you found worked for you in the process of forgiveness?
Well, I would have to say I ignored my initial process was to ignore most of it. Talk about feeling those emotions. I chose to shove mine down. Similarly, it was modeled to me. You don't talk about it. You don't deal with it. You don't feel it. And so I spent many years not feeling, or at least attempting to not feel. I mean, I'm an empath. It's impossible to not feel, but it really pushing it all down and letting it simmer deep down below and not recognizing how it was impacting my life in lots of ways and not having no understanding of it. So I didn't actually live out that victim, that I didn't view that for myself. I kind of thought, well, this is what happened. I'm going to make the most of it. And in many ways, that's been great because that's helped me. That's definitely become a real asset in the work that I do, particularly working with people now as a psychotherapist, but not to the process of pushing all of your feelings aside and pushing yourself aside. So I think that it wasn't until I got divorced and that loss, that chosen loss, broke me open to start feeling things not only in the current, but also that came up from the past. And I stopped pushing them down. And I started, like we talked about earlier, allowing them to come up. And with that came up a lot of anger and a lot of sadness that I didn't realize I was still holding on to. And I think it was during that time period when I was really focusing on hearing myself, listening to myself, no longer ignoring myself. Because I think we do that. We kind of take on that pattern that we learned in childhood. Like, well, if you're not being paid attention to, you just kind of go through life like that. But I started to pay attention to myself, and I realized how angry I was and how much it was holding me back, how much I was not speaking up for myself, how much I had become a people pleaser, as a way to adapt and get what I needed and all of those things. So I just remember feeling this pain of, I don't want to live like this, when the anger came up, it was really uncomfortable because it was, that was when I would push down quickly because I thought, well, this is useless. I'm not going to do this. I need to move on. And then not recognizing that the anger was actually showing me something, the imbalances that were going on inside me and based on the way that I was reacting to life. So when those imbalances became really in my face, Whereas, like, gosh, I feel like I'm giving out so much and I'm not getting as much in return. That's when I knew I had to look deeper into that forgiveness and look at those deeply embedded patterns, which absolutely began with my relationship with my mom.
Yeah, very good. Well, we're up on a break already. So everyone stay with us. This is a live show, so if you'd like to call in and share a comment or have a question for Lynn or Misty, feel free to do so. Bob is in the house, and it's 833-220-1200. Again, 833-220-1200. We'll be back in a moment and then switch over to Misty.
Experience a different yet profound healing with Reconnective Healing. Includes yet expands beyond any and all known forms of energy healing. The Reconnective Healing spectrum is comprised of the full healing and evolutionary continuum of energy, light, and information. It allows for healings that are not just physical, not just mental, not just emotional, yet go beyond that to bring healing that includes the evolution of your very being and essence. Deborah Beauvais, trained and certified by world-renowned Dr. Eric Pearl, offers appointment hours at Seacock Family Chiropractic in Seacock, Massachusetts. For questions or to set up both distance or local sessions, call Deborah at 508-431-1959. Again, 508-431-1959. Or go to lovebyintuition.com. That's lovebyintuition.com.
Take a journey to a place of the divine love within with Deborah Beauvais on the Love by Intuition Show, Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. Eastern. Our message is love in the purest form. The light within us all is a guide to recall our beginning, to learn to love self and humankind, and to feel the higher power of our own divinity. To attract love, one needs to be love. Come join us and step into this glorious vibration called love.
After narrowly surviving the attack on Sandy Hook Elementary, first grade teacher Caitlin Roy DeBellis was left searching for answers that would never come. Eventually, she chose to focus on questions that could be answered. How do I make sure this tragedy doesn't define us? How do we get our control back? Those two questions led her to found the 501c3 nonprofit organization Classes for Classes. When gifts poured into their classroom, she decided they would help someone else by paying it forward and being kind. This developed into a social network which allows K-8 classrooms to connect so that every student in the United States can learn these crucial lessons. Classes for Classes' mission is to build students' social-emotional intelligence by connecting them to care. All C4C projects are crowd-funded. Any teacher in the U.S. can visit classesforclasses.org. That's classes, the number 4, classes.org. Sign up today.
In a world facing annihilation, a miraculous African nun rises to become the first female pope through a web of war, murder, and betrayal. Loved by some, hated by many, she becomes the deadly target of Islamic terrorists and her own cardinals as she introduces a new vision that will either save humanity or accelerate its destruction. 4 people must race against a nuclear holocaust to learn her astonishing secret. Pope Annalisa is available at petercanova.com, Amazon, and other online booksellers and bookstores worldwide.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
And we are back, and welcome back. If you're just tuning in, we are with Lynn, Reilly, and Misty Tyme, both authors in their own right, as well as co-writers for Crappy to Happy, Sacred Stories of Transformational Joy. And we are talking about forgiveness, forgiveness around alcoholic and codependency moms, which all 3 of us have experienced. Before the break, Lynn was sharing how things were bubbling up and it was just uncomfortable. And that's one of the things I found for myself, too, is I was just tired of feeling angry, I was just over it. And so that's where I started to say, okay, to myself, what can I do to get rid of this? Or how can I heal this? Or how can I heal myself? So thank you, Lynn, for that. And so, Misty, for you, share, what the first step was for you to start the forgiveness. Earlier you were saying that it was once your mom had dementia, but what was the first step for yourself?
Well, my first step kind of came in chunks, in my opinion. The universe, God, works that way. It's a little tap on the shoulder and then full on, a slap across the face. You need to work this out. And that's exactly what happened. So my mother, right before my mother passed, and I talk about this in the Crappy to Happy story, that my mom was really just losing more and more of herself every day. But in turn, it was also a gift because she truly was in the moment. It was talking about the weather. I would walk in and she would brighten up and she would say, "Oh, it's Misty." And I'm like, that is something that my child's soul was looking for, even though it was very sad to see. And I still had, Lynn mentioned earlier, the anger that kind of bubbles up and you think that you've got it handled. I'm a really good stuffer. It sounds like you guys are too. And it was all happening at the same time. I was sad that my mom was losing who she was. At the same time, I had to give up that hope that she would turn in magically to the mother that I wanted and soothe that child. And then I also was an adult who was now taking care of my parent. And so I felt like the parent to her. And I was able to give her something I desperately wanted, which was that comforting love. It was like I was able to surround her in the love. And one day I was visiting her. We were outside. She was in a wheelchair. And she looked up at me and said, "Are you Misty?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm Misty, Mom." And she says, "Oh, I love you." And at that moment, I knew it wasn't an "I'm sorry." It wasn't a, all these things and the people I put in front of you and the very abusive situations. She wasn't apologizing for that. She was just purely saying she loved me. And that was such a healing moment. And I knew that I needed to, quote, let it go, right? But I still didn't understand what that really meant until 6 months later when my twin brother took his life. And I was in seminary at the time. What a perfect place to be when you have some major drama happen in your life, right? I mean, surrounded by such loving souls, right? But the fact is, I had just been ordained. I graduated from my big seminary after a couple of years, the whole thing, and my twin brother took his life. I was still left with anger and unfulfilled expectations, just like I was with my mother. I had unfulfilled expectations of what she should have been, what she promised to be to me by just giving birth, right? And unfortunately, both my mother and my brother didn't have the will or the skill to be that person to me. So ultimately, I had to research what forgiveness is and is not, because I'm sure Lynn can attest to being a counselor. People have that messed up. Like between religion and Disney, we don't know what forgiveness is. We're supposed to let it go, but no one tells us how, right? Well, ultimately, I had to uncover the how. And just like, Deborah, like you said, you wanted to feel better. Believe me, this was self-serving. I wanted to feel better. And that's what I had to uncover, what forgiveness really was and what it was not. Then I had to understand that both my mother, my twin brother, and ex-husbands and, all the humans, some people don't have the skill to be the person that they really thought they could be to you. And it could be alcoholism, it could be mental health, it could be bad examples. I think, Deborah, you talked about also that era, right? My mom wasn't ever in the era where you dealt with your stuff. You pulled up those imaginary bootstraps and you got on with life. For her, it was the next husband and the next husband and the next husband, try to fix the problem, and she didn't want to hear anything about what she had ever done to somebody, like that it would affect somebody. You're just supposed to get on with it. So I realized that she didn't ever have the skill to be the mother that I really think she wanted to be, and that helped me forgive her.
Right. Right.
I love that you said that. Do you mind if I add on to that?
Sure.
Sure.
I had a very similar experience in my, just again, it was probably 5 years ago, maybe 4 years ago. I was sitting next to my mother's grave, and I was talking to her, and I was in that place that was kind of my year of really digging into the forgiveness, and that's exactly the thought that popped in my head was, it's my expectation of what it's supposed to be that's setting me up for disappointment over and over again. And when I looked at my mother, I thought, this is someone I don't know why I always use the analogy, but expecting her to be able to run a marathon with, at the speed of 2 legs, but only having 1 leg, and thinking that she should be able to do it. And there was no way for her to do that. And it wasn't just her, but all kinds of other people in my life that I have these expectations that they should be the way that I think they can, or that they have the skill, or they have the ability, or they have the will, like you said, Misty, that they just don't have for whatever reason. So it's wanting them to meet my need or my expectations what was setting me up over and over and over again for that anger and that disappointment, which led to my frustration and unhappiness. So that was definitely a huge moment with my mother, and that practice for me, it's definitely a practice of forgiveness, is looking at expecting something from someone that they just can't give.
Right.
Oh,
Right.
Lynn,
Beautifully
I'm just
said.
so excited. I'm so excited, Lynn, because you and I could talk about this forever. Oh my goodness, that just makes me so excited that you also had that moment.
Yeah.
It's a powerful, life-changing moment.
Yeah.
Right.
And again, a practice, because it doesn't just, at least for me, it's not a one-shot deal.
Right. Right. The thing is, when you become aware, and I know just from hearing the two of you, you became aware, and that's how the journey of healing started. But when you become aware, you start to think about your mom. You start to think about her life. You start remembering some of the sweet moments, even if there's one. And then you realize that she wasn't equipped, just like you're saying, Lynn. She didn't have the ability to be the mom that we all hoped she would be. And, we hung on that for years. But when you stop to think where she was, and she couldn't do it, and she, from her perspective, instead of your own needs and your own neediness of wanting love from your parents. But that's what I found, and it sounds strange to some people, but what I found is I started thinking of the earlier day when we were really little, and then, from there I started to realize that, she did everything she could with what she knew at that time, and then it becomes a gift. It becomes a gift because it's a gift to us, to you, Lynn, to you, Misty, with your brother included, that you have this inner strength. And then the gift is what you experience, you can turn that around and serve others and give to others and help them through their time, help them see or feel what you have been through, so maybe they can get there. And it may not take them years to go through the forgiveness. And the forgiveness isn't condoning, as we all know when we get into forgiveness. It's all about forgiving them, forgiving ourselves, and then there's the freedom, the feeling and being free of all those crazy merry-go-round thoughts that go around in one's mind when one has experienced these kinds of things. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah.
That the freedom is real and the gift?
Oh, yeah, because anger takes up a lot of space. It takes up a lot of energy. So when you give yourself, when you are able to reduce it or relieve it or dissipate it in any way, that gives you a whole lot of room to do other things with. When you're not holding on to that anymore, and you feed it. You know, when we're angry, we look around us right in this country. We feed it. We look for proof of all the reasons why we're victims and why we should be angry. It's a lot of space that takes up in our lives to be feeling those big emotions that we think is doing something for us, but really just spins in a cycle and goes nowhere.
Right.
I would echo that with the fact that we just love to be right. We do everything we can to support our belief system. Out of any day to be talking about this, but ultimately with my mother, with my brother, I had a laundry list of why they were wrong, which then turned around to what made me right. So I was so desperate for them to say, yes, you were right. Yes, you are living a better life. You are better. You are this, and we're so sorry, that we all run around hoping and in our brains, running it between our hearts and our heads, that we are right, they are wrong, and our expectations should be fulfilled because they just don't know what they're talking about, or they just live their life so horribly. Even if that is true, even if it is true, it's about adjusting your expectations of the other person. And that was huge for me, because when I did that, just like we talked about, thinking about them differently, thinking about them when they were young, those sweet moments that you mentioned, Deborah, is ultimately when I did that for both my mother and my brother and other people in my life, empathy snuck in for them. And as soon as empathy came in, forgiveness became much easier.
Yes. Well, we're
absolutely. Compassion could not possibly be more healing.
Yes. Yeah, and you know what? I think when you experience these kinds of things as a child, you do become a compassionate, sometimes empath, but a compassionate, loving person. And it all starts with loving yourself, as you know, and to get that love that you're searching for outside of yourself is really within yourselves, as we find out. Well, we're coming up on a break, and I want to give out how to get in touch with both Lynn and Misty. For Misty, it's Misty Tyme, and Tyme is spelled Tyme, MistyTyme.com. You can learn more about her there and reach out and purchase her books. Purchase Crappy to Happy, of course, but the books that are on these sites as well. And they may be Book of the Month coming up. We'll talk about that after the show via email for both Lynn and Misty. And then for Lynn, it's Living with Serendipity, and that is exactly how it sounds, livingwithserendipity.com. Again, the number here, if anyone would like to call in, Bob's in the house, 833-220-1200. Again, 833-220-1200. When we come back, I'd like to talk with both of you about where everyone has transitioned to the other side, the communication and the peace that you may have received from the communication from our loved ones on the other side, which as we evolve as the human race, and hopefully we're evolving after tonight, that we are closer to those on the other side than we really have been led to believe. And it's all about love. It's all about surrounding ourselves with love and opening our hearts. So stay tuned. We'll be back in a moment more with Love by Intuition.
Take a journey to a place of the divine love within with Deborah Beauvais on the Love by Intuition Show, Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. Eastern. Our message is love in the purest form. The light within us all is a guide to recall our beginning, to learn to love self and humankind, and to feel the higher power of our own divinity. To attract love, one needs to be love. Come join us and step into this glorious vibration called love.
Are you searching for a way to help create global change? Dream Vision 7 Radio Network's vision is to have an eclectic group of radio hosts dedicated to educating, enlightening, and helping humankind with positive messages and tools that enhance lives using different modalities and programs. If you would like to join our team and help illuminate the universe, call Deborah at 508-226-1723 or Deborah at dreamvision7radio.com.
Delight your kids with an enchanting journey by reading the Paper Doll Kids children's book by Deborah Beauvais and Janine Sullivan. There's even a catchy tune, Kids for Love Song, produced by Bob Sherwood and sung by kids just like yours. The story weaves around 7 paper dolls flying around the world doing good deeds as they bring important attention to our endangered animal friends. There's even a magical ring with a universal message. Kids become interested in service projects, action through compassion, and planting seeds that nurture positive change. The Paper Doll Kids and Kids for Love Song are a production of the Kids for Love Project. Get the book now on Amazon Kindle and the song on CD Baby or iTunes.
Why are we here? How can we be happy? Questions asked from millennials to boomers. Crappy to Happy, Sacred Stories of Transformational Joy answers them using true stories of grit, grace, and love. James Redfield, author of The Celestine Prophecy, wrote in the foreword, "This book is a seminar about emerging truths and offers grounded solutions through the art of the comeback." Dr. Bernie Siegel, a contributing author, wrote, "Bodies die, but spirits and consciousness survive and recycle." So, grab some tissues, open your book, and prepare to cry and laugh till it heals. Crappy to Happy by Reverend Ariel Patricia and Kathleen O'Keefe Canavas. Available from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and booksellers worldwide.
It's a child's job to play, to learn, and to have fun. It's an adult's job to keep them safe. Did you know that 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys will be sexually abused before the age of 18? Every day, families enter the Children's Advocacy Center because a child's courage to tell someone what happened to them. Keeping our children safe starts with a conversation. This is Michelle Aranger, Executive Director of the Children's Advocacy Center. Learn more on how to keep your child safe. Visit cacofbc.org. This message made possible by the Fall River Rotary Club.
The First Souls Trilogy, one of the most highly awarded fictional independent book series on the market, is a grand vision of human evolution. It chronicles the first spirit consciousness to enter the material world in 3 page-turning novels that introduce a new paradigm of reality based on genuine ancient wisdom and quantum science. These inspirational thrillers will force you to rethink the nature of the world in which we live. Visit the petercanova.com website for information and ordering.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
And welcome back. If you'd like to learn more about Dream Vision 7 Radio and TV Network, go on our site, Dream Visions, all one word with an S on the end, the number 7, radio.com. Learn about all our hosts, the most glorious hosts, because they are here to serve you. Many of them are MDs, PhDs. We've got a few attorneys. Many of them have their own modalities to help heal. We just give the tools and you can choose what works for you, but we're all going in the same direction of unity, consciousness, helping each other, solutions, coming up with new ideas, inspiration, all of that is what we are about. And so we're back with Lynn, Reilly, and Misty Tyme, co-writers of the Crappy to Happy books that you've heard during the break. written by Reverend Ariel Patricia and Kathleen O'Keefe Cannabis, and we're all co-writers in there. So get yourself a copy and go on both their sites that we mentioned earlier and check them out. And so now, ladies, let's talk about have you had messages through the time with first Misty, both with your mom and your brother, and being a twin, you must be receiving all kinds of messages knowing that you are supported by them.
Well, we all, first of all, yes, I am, but I do have to make sure I pay attention, right? And, we all give social media a really hard time, but ultimately the social media memories that pop up, and just on Halloween, a memory popped up of my mother. She was in her facility, and her stage name was Betty Tyme. That's where I get my name, Misty Tyme. It truly is my name, not a horse, not a dog. It really is my name. And but ultimately, I dressed her up like a clock, and she was Betty Tyme. And and I'm wearing pink hair, and there's just a picture of us in her facility together. And I picked up my phone, as we're not supposed to do right when we wake up, but I did. I picked up my phone, and that picture popped right up. And I just felt this sense of, that's such a beautiful memory. It was so much fun to laugh with her when she was in that moment. And I do look for those things. And I've had some great mediums also over the last few years come to me, and I got the I'm sorry, because they know it all now, don't they? They know everything. And so ultimately I look for little things. Both my twin brother and I, we did not have some secret twin telepathy or anything like that. We were very distant. We were two different humans that just so happened to be born 3 minutes apart. But ultimately, I now know, I used to say, I don't know why I got him. I don't. But now I feel like we do the work together. When I talk about apologies in both my workshops or when I'm doing a talk or even in my book, I talk about the fact that I can now give him an apology. Something I would have never done. For I know that I hurt him. I know he knew how much I didn't like him. And how much I worked at making sure everybody knew how horrible he was, because then that made me so great. But now I can apologize for that. So we get to do work together.
Beautiful.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Thank you.
Well, I'm so I'm happy for you, both of you. And Misty, the reason I say happy is that you're both in such a great place, and sure that we all have our journey of healing and learning and letting go and embracing and all the things that happen now and even in the future, and the journey goes on as long as we're here. But I'm happy that you both have found this freedom and this joy, and you can't put a price on the freedom that you feel when you're at peace with everything, when it all kind of makes sense. So Lynn, how about yourself?
Well, I actually I avoided my mother for a long time because I was so angry. So I didn't really start inviting her into my world where I'd actually allow for it until probably the last 5 or 7 years. Once I started practicing energy therapy myself and became a master instructor, I really became much more sensitive to it the more I practiced with myself and other people. So I started to feel her much more, which was really comforting. And I remember actually doing energy work on my brother and feeling my mother's energy in his heart, which was really a gorgeous experience to be able to feel it from the outside, and particularly for my brother. But one thing that was so profound to me that actually happened in the past year, which really gave me that kind of wow proof, was I had a dream about a year and a half ago, my mother came to me in my dream, and I really hadn't dreamt of her in years and years. And she came to hug me in my dream, and I was very uncomfortable because that was not our relationship. I was the one who took care of her. So her coming to comfort me and put her arms around me felt awkward and unnatural. But she kind of just patiently waited for me to let go of that. And then when I let her embrace me, I fell into her arms and just sobbed. And it was such a profound experience because I actually let go of all of my need for control and trying to do everything right. And in that moment, it was like that true feeling of surrender, that I could trust someone else and I could trust something else and I could trust that love. And I had this moment where I thought, oh my gosh, this is what a mother's love feels like. I've never experienced this before. And I'd wondered if that was the experience that my daughter had when being connected with me. And later that evening, I had an experience with my daughter where she's very independent. And she had asked me to come, and she was like 16 years old at the time, and she asked me to come and sit with her. And she said, could you just lay with me for a minute? And I put my arms around her, and she cried in my arms. And it was like this full circle moment that I felt like I had been prepared for. And I thought, well, this is it. But even more interesting, the next day, my brother had contacted me and said he had found a whole box of memorabilia from our childhood that he just happened to find. And so it kind of set me into this, like, well, I just want to tell you about this dream that I had. But, we're looking through all of this childhood stuff, which, of course, brings up tons and tons of memories. And so we both were digging into that experience. And in those boxes, we found a book that my mother had written that I had completely forgotten about, and she had written it about a year before she had taken her life. And the entire book was on hope and connecting with hope and connecting with faith. Yeah, I mean, it was like life-changing. And I was like, wow, reading this is really changing the story that I've developed in my mind and I've been living out for years and years. And so that was a very profound discovery for me. And so for the next several months, I really started to dig into that process and go through those memories and recognize that a lot of the stories I had been telling myself were not really factual and that were kind of spun from a child's mind. And the end of the year, it ended up with this really beautiful moment. It was this past December was my mother's 30th anniversary of her death, and it happened to be on the 30th of December. And I thought, oh my gosh, what a profound year, 30th and the 30th. And we were going out to celebrate my birthday because, again, my birthday was right afterwards with my father and my stepmother and my kids. And my father came over and they gave me a card that they found that day that was in a random drawer that was from my mother to me, wishing me a happy birthday from exactly 30 years ago.
Oh my!
And it was one of those, what? This can't be, and I'm all about serendipity. So having that kind of come all together was like, okay, fine, I'm a believer. It was really quite remarkable.
Yeah, remarkable doesn't cover it, Lynn. That is something else.
It was awesome.
All of those messages, all for you, all for you. Wow.
It was quite a gift.
Both of you. Well, we only have a few minutes left, ladies, and I've so enjoyed our discussion and sharing and all the, the raw conversation that we needed to have, as well as hope, as your mom has written, Lynn. Hope for yourselves, for your families, for the future, for everyone. So in just like 1 minute each, what do you want to leave the listeners with? Someone's out there struggling with the same kind of experience and needing to forgive for their own freedom. What would you say to them, Misty, in 1 little minute?
Well, I think we talked about it a little bit. It's about those expectations that you have of that person. And even though I am sure they're absolutely perfectly normal expectations, ultimately you need to ask yourself, does this person have the will to meet my expectations? Do they want to? Or do they have the skill? And if the answer is no, they don't have the skill, I'm going to ask you to remember to forgive them and adjust your expectations, because now you have the authority of forgiveness, the ability to let go of your expectations. Again, I'm sure they are normal and totally acceptable, but for that person, they aren't. They just don't have the ability to meet them. But most importantly, thank the people that exceed your expectations, because we kind of get those other people all the attention. But the people that show up for you and exceed your expectations, don't forget to thank them.
Well said. In 30 seconds, Lynn?
I would keep mine real simple. Feel it all. Everything that you're experiencing that's coming up, a lot of that repressed stuff, we're taught to repress. We're taught that strength is to shove it down, and that's simply not true. Strength is actually to surrender, to allow for it to come up and to feel all of the stuff that gets repressed, because it does get built up. And the more that you release it, it's just emotion, energy and emotion moving through you. The more clarity you have, the more connection to self, the more hope that you feel, the more light that you feel. And it's super important to release that and experience whatever it is that's happening.
Beautiful. Beautiful, both of you. Thank you so much. I'm in gratitude to have you both on the show. And for everyone out there, please share this episode with your friends, your family, everyone, and listen to it more than once, because it's just full of nectar that you can take into your life and make a difference within yourself. It can turn your life around. So think about that. And for those out there, everything that's happening, hold on to the vibration of love. Love always exceeds, and we need to have that vibration of love throughout the entire universe. So let's work with the universe and tap into the love that we all are. We all are love, and we are all one. So let's support each other. Until the next time we come together, au revoir.
Are you seeking a clearer path to love? Then tune in to the Love by Intuition show next week. All designed to your highest good. To contact Deborah Beauvais, owner of Empowered Connections, call her at 508-226-1723. That's 508-226-1723. Or link on to lovebyintuition.com. Remember, we are all one, and we are all part of the miracle of love.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.